I love color grading. Even just giving my videos a slight creative look is always so fun. But there are a few fundamentals you should learn, especially if you're a beginner, that will always give you a consistent, good looking color grade. So here is my step-by-step process that I tackle with every shot. Firstly, it's important to acknowledge how you actually set up your camera and shoot your shots. Preferably, you'd want to shoot in a log profile. At first, the footage coming out of the camera is going to look very grey and flat. But this is actually because this really flat profile helps preserve as much dynamic range as possible, which then allows more flexibility in post-production. But you want to make sure you expose your camera when using log profiles correctly so you can maximize the potential coming out of them. A lot of the time, I tend to expose more to the right, or in other words, slightly overexpose your image. Obviously not to the point where you're blowing out your highlights and stuff like that, but I feel like doing this, you can really maximize your dynamic range. Also, when shooting, and especially in a log profile, you should try and shoot in 10-bit if you can. 10-bit is just way more color depth in your image and provides way more flexibility in post without it breaking down so quickly compared to 8-bit. Alright, so now that is all done, let's actually get color grading. Import your footage, apply your favorite color tools, and let's get started. I'm on Final Cut Pro and will be using Color Finale to color grade my videos, as that's what I've been using for years. Even if you don't have the same software that I do, you can still use these same steps with your respective tools. Firstly, we want to make some contrast, exposure, and white balance adjustments to bring back the image to make it look a bit more normal. Open up your RGB parade waveform and keep an eye on this graph as you do these next steps. Bring down the shadows until they just reach the 0 mark on the waveform. Then lift up the gain until the highlights of the image just reach under 100. This will give you some nice even contrast without blowing the image out. From here, you can add some saturation to your liking, and then you want to make sure your white balance is looking as white as possible. I usually just eyeball this because a lot of the time I don't need a perfectly white balance in my shots. But if you need like a clinically white, like you seriously need perfect white in your shots, then it's probably best to use a gray card when first setting up your white balance on your camera when shooting, because then you know you will have perfect white balance set. I'm just going to be doing a super basic color grade with this clip and just sort of enhancing the colors that are already there. But using the techniques that I'm going to show you, these simple techniques, you can really adopt this to do really whatever you want with your image. We'll start with the hue and saturation curves to change the hues of certain colors in the image. This is where you're going to have to experiment to sort of find what you're looking for, or at least if you have a reference image to work off of. For this clip, I want the water to be just a bit more teal blue and the sky to be a bit more of a vibrant red. I'll just bring it up a little bit to push in that teal color. Not too much though, otherwise it'll be a bit too unnatural for my liking. Then I'll select the orange hues in the sunset and then bring that down to a bit more of a vibrant red. If we head over to the curves section, we can make some more contrast adjustments. In the luma curves, a standard S curve is pretty popular to start with just to boost some contrast. If you want more of a faded sort of film look, you can lift up the shadows so they aren't so crunched black. And then you can also bring down the highlights slightly too. As you can see, it's a bit more of a faded image in those areas and it isn't so contrasty and punchy. But this is also a personal preference, so you find what works for you. In Color Finale, I can also grade using color density. This directly affects the saturation density of colors, which can often provide a nice way to saturate the image compared to normal saturating. So I just want to add a bit more punch in the blues and also the reds just to make it pop a little bit more. We can also use the color wheels to inject color straight into specific luma parts of the image. So say I wanted some more warmth in my highlights, I could do that here, or more green or blue in my shadows. This can be a huge part of making your grade look really unique. These are just some simple steps to get you started, but I say the best way to learn is to just do a shit ton of experimenting and practicing, and eventually you'll find your way. There are conversion LUTs out there that you can apply directly to your log footage that will basically turn it from that flat looking grey log footage into a Rec 709 standard color space. And usually you can just download the free ones from the actual camera manufacturers' websites and you can use those. But there's also some creators out there who make their own, which also tend to be a bit better. There are also many LUTs out there that'll just straight up give you a color grading sort of look, which actually can be very useful to save time, especially if you make your own. like me. If you guys want to check out my $5 bliss light, I would greatly appreciate that. It's a subtle, warm, blissful sort of color look that will basically look good on all of your footage. I swear I use it on like 90% of my footage. So yeah, that is how I go about color correcting and grading my footage. Keep it simple, use your eyeballs, and get creative with it. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
All I remember was the color red.
I didn't want it to end like this.
Your legacy starts now if you get up.